Hi there, and welcome to the last part of this tutorial. This episode is aimed for more advanced students because I assume you are already familiar with some theory concepts such as 4-part harmony and basic voicings, chord extensions and inversions, etc. We are going to expand the harmony using two key elements: dominant chords and a bass line, which is a new element we haven't mentioned before. Sus dominant chords are typically used to delay the resolution of a dominant chord. We can find them easily starting from our basic dominant chord. Then we move the third half step up, finding the key note of the sus dominant, which is the fourth, in this case G. Let's take a look at the beginning of our song. We have a long dominant chord that lasts one bar. We can create more movement by delaying its resolution, placing a sus dominant chord in the first two beats of the bar. A common way of voicing sus chords consists in using its upper structures. For example, we can think of D sus as a C major triad over D. This way, we emphasize the extensions of the chord, in this case, the ninth. If we go a bit further, we can see it as a E minor triad over D. Now we are also playing the 13th of the chord, and we can also play around with the inversions of these. The second part of the song offers us a good opportunity to apply this concept. We can see it as an E minor 7th chord over D. There are other kinds of dominants besides D dominant that we can use to create harmonic movement. These are called secondary dominants. Secondary dominants resolve to other scale degrees instead of resolving to our tonic. For example, it's common to use the secondary dominant that resolves to the main dominant. I'll refer to it as a second dominant. Another frequently used is the third dominant, which resolves to the 6th degree, which is a minor chord. Let's have a look to this passage. We've used the third dominant. It resolves to the 4th degree. Instead of resolving to the 6th degree. However, it doesn't sound odd. This is because both chords, E minor and C major, share many fundamental notes in common. A good place to use the second dominant is towards the end. We can see how the second dominant resolves to the dominant and then to our tonic. I'd like to add one more thing about dominant chords. All of them can be dressed up with some tension. In the example we just played, the melody note is already an extension of our chord, which is the ninth. And I would also add the 13th of the chord. We already talked about the sus chord and how, if we think of it as a triad over a bass, we are actually playing some nice tensions of the chord. Although now we are just playing diatonic tensions, sometimes we can also alter them. In its basic form, this dominant chord would be, but instead I've used a non-diatonic tension, the flat ninth, which resolves nicely to the tonic. Maybe in a future tutorial we can discuss a bit about available tensions in a chord and how to voice them on the piano. Let's move on to another key element that we haven't seen in the previous episodes, the bass line. It's a very important element because it has several functions. First, it provides a steady pulse throughout the song, in this case usually playing quarter notes. Second, harmonically provides a smooth connection between chords. Before, when going from G to D, the bass would jump, but we can instead make a bass line going up through the scale. We can also use the scale going down, like in this case, connecting G with E. Actually, we can think of a bass line as a counter melody, a melody that complements the main one. Let's have a look at the beginning of the song. The bass line is D, G, but we can make something more interesting. For example, which complements our melody. If we try to harmonize this bass line, we start with a sus chord and then a dominant chord, but this time the seventh is on the bass. And then we can resolve to our tonic. Before we finish, I'd like to mention a couple of chord progressions that I used for this final arrangement, which I think are widely used. They work pretty well in many situations, so I suggest you to get familiar with them and add them to your music vocabulary. The first one is a bluesy progression. I'm sure you've heard before. Let's analyze what's happening there. Starting from the fourth degree, we move up chromatically. First to the sharp 4 diminished, then to the tonic, but inverted. Now, from here we move to the third dominant, which resolves to the sixth minor as expected. Notice how the third dominant, in this case B dominant, is inverted. The third is on the bass. The second classic chord progression can be found right at the end. We have this cadence. If we simplify, what we have is a typical plagal cadence, 4th degree resolving to 1. However, by using a more melodic bass line, we can make it way more interesting, like this. Now we just need to harmonize it, keeping in mind that we start on the 4th degree and we have to land on the 1st. That B on the bass could be a tonic chord inverted, and then A is the minor 2nd degree. As you can see, probably the hardest part of a good arrangement is not so much finding the harmonic material, but instead, I think is how to connect the different elements with coherence. This last chord progression is a good example of it. We have a melodic bass line and also an inner melody that are going down. And the two of them complement the last note of the melody that is held while the rest move. Well, that's all for now. I hope you found this helpful. If you feel a bit lost, I recommend you to check out the 2 previous episodes aimed for beginner and intermediate students level. I encourage you to try to make your own piano arrangements using the tools I've explained through this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching and see you next time.